Ja, wir machen einfach mal weiter.
So let's continue. So welcome to the final stint of today's event, the panel discussion. So I think we can now discuss PIWIs and everything that we've heard today. Let me just invite all of you and also those who are with us online to give us their questions. Not just amongst experts and wine growers, PIWIs are much discussed, but they're also well known to a lot of consumers. There's now also a variety of a PIWI variety that's admitted for champagne cuvée in Champagne. So that's very encouraging, as is the expansion of varieties in Germany. We now have these different varieties that keep growing in the vineyard. So I can certainly say that there is a dynamic development. And now when talking about marketing, which is going to be the focus of our discussion, it's all about visibility of these resistant varieties, and it's all about the question of how consumers respond and how communication and marketing can be successful. I have three experts with me here on the panel that I would like to introduce. Andreas Dilger, who has a vineyard with 100% PIWIs here in Freiburg. So always been working with organic viticulture, so he has a lot of experience. At the center, Martin Schmidt from Eichstätten nearby, from Kiefer Vineyard. And I don't think he needs much of an introduction. He's been cultivating PIWIs for many years too, and is leading in the region and across Germany. And then Christoph Nocki of Geisenheim University, who has been looking at consumer preferences for resistant varieties for many years. So, first question to Martin. Now, when talking about marketing PIWIs, how is sale going and what are the challenges? Well, I have three operations. At Kiefer, I sell a lot of PIWI, but not under that name, because I took over the operation in 2008. I have 3,000 to 4,000 bottles. I was able to plant kiwis, so I have great potential for kiwis. 22 varieties, 20 hectares already. But now I'm actively working on marketing PIWI with my new PIWI collective, where we do 100% PIWI, and we looked at how to do this. Started with a Crémant, which is a label that doesn't require a variety to be named, because Crémant speaks for itself. It's a high-quality product, and it is actually really predestined to be used with kiwi varieties, because the grapes can be harvested sooner. You don't have you have high yields. You can harvest them early. You have a great product. And for me, another reason was that I didn't want to invest into equipment, but I wanted to use the equipment that I had already. And so we already have 15 hectares. And then we have other products where we don't use PIWI. It's actually, we call it the PIWI Collective. Everyone knows what it's about, but we have created a brand that's called Nous. And Nous means new or us in French. And so here we started with Crémant. We also found a great designer. We certainly spent some money here on a good design. We won 2 design awards, and we also wanted to win the German Sustainability Award. So that was our focus right from the start, and we've managed to do that. We've achieved that. And so marketing's working very well. And so we also do tastings for final consumers, and it is very well received. So if they hear PIWI new robust varieties, 80% plant production, crop protection reduction, and consumers really like that. So that's direct communication. When you have it on the shelf, all you can see is it's a Crémant with a very, very attractive label. And because you can say that this is a great product that I can use to save the world, well, it has to taste good, it has to look great. So that's the objective. And at Kiefer, it's quite similar. This is about the idea. It's not primarily about environmental protection. Of course, everything has to be cool. Everything has to be hip. And we are actually reaching a totally new, young target group with this. Well, thank you. This is interesting. The Crémant, I've tried it, and I was surprised. So what grapes are particularly used? What do you use? It's 70% Sauvignon Gris. But we also have 2.5 hectares Johanniter, which is also very well suited. But we only use 5 or 10%, otherwise it'll be too green. But the Sauvignon Gris is ideal. We have a reserve now, which will be marketed after 35 months, which will be 100% Sauvignon Gris, which will be equal to Blanc de Blanc Champagne. You are chairman of PIWI Germany, so the German chapter of PIWI International. And so what activities do you do as an association to make the variety better known within Germany and internationally? Well, PIWI International has been around for more than 25 years, and I already mentioned earlier in the discussion that that's how the name came about. And PIWI Germany was founded 5 years ago. And here in the VitiFit project, we weren't able to be a partner because we didn't exist at the time. But nevertheless, we were in contact, and our contribution, well, one of them builds on the topics mentioned today. People are open to trying PIWIs, but the most frequent feedback is, well, it sounds great, but how am I supposed to know what PIWI wine is? There are so many varieties. So here, once again, we have this special case of having to make sure that PIWIs are recognized as PIWI via the brand. We always understand PIWI as a brand. We communicate it. we don't always communicate that it's fungus resistance, blah, 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 but we just use PIWI and the acronym and the logo. It's a logo that is internationally protected and is available for all operations. And because we are there for the cause. Our association's been around for a long time, exactly with that cause in mind, fostering PIWIs for sustainable viticulture. So this is a core task. And of course, here we are grateful for any support we can get from institutions and all viticulture associations, as well as wine growers, so that we can promote PIWIs and sustainable viticulture as a result. And another new aspect, and this is news that I am able to announce today, in the last week in October, we are going to award the German PIWI Award together with the DLG, so that everyone. So I'd like to announce that today so that everybody here can maybe support this project. Of course, we're going to communicate this more. The award ceremony is going to be on the 8th of November in Berlin during a major PIWI summit. So this is another tool of making PIWI better known and better accepted. I just have a very small wine growing business here, and I've been working with PIWIs for 25 years. Switched to 100% PIWIs 20 years ago. I have 8 varieties, but just 5.5 hectares. So, of course, this is maybe a different level to that of Martin's, but I can still confirm everything he said. You need enthusiasm, you need attractiveness, and we heard a quote earlier. Fortunately, how lucky that PIWIs exist. There was an interview that I gave to Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung many years ago. So this is just a core. If we can be so enthusiastic about PIWIs with the structures that they need to be marketed, and we will, PIWIs will prevail. We've just looked at the last 5 years and the time of this project, and if you look at what has happened in that 5 years alone, you get quite a good idea of how the next 5 years could proceed. And someone who, like me, has been in the business for 25 years can be quite relaxed, because if so much has happened in 5 years, and before then, the previous 20 years, not that much had happened, I think we are on a roll here. Well, and you just mentioned brand, and we've heard a lot about the PIWI brand already, and we know that branded wines are very much in demand by consumers. And this is my question to you, Gerclear. What factors help PIWI to become more accepted amongst consumers? What are the factors based on your experience and your... So are you talking about the acceptance by consumers or the entire value chain? Well, let's focus on the consumer. Okay, let's focus on the consumer. But there's something else I need to say, but let's start with this. Whether you believe it or not, most consumers know very little about wine. This might not come as a surprise to you. And you saw in our presentation that we are now talking about 42 million potential wine drinkers who are 16 or older. And of course, we can't reach everyone. And it would be unrealistic to even attempt to win everybody. But there is good news, because there are different segments, and this is where we really have to look at the different segments. Certain target groups are not interesting at all, but there are other target groups that are that could be very interested in PV wines, or at least trying them out, not rejecting them straight away. So it depends on the target group. The age group is also relevant here. And we have done representative surveys, and we have found that there is a very strong group that is totally opposed to it. I'm not going to mention age or gender. Anyway, it's the old men. But there is such a strong resistance, and we've rarely seen this. On the other hand, so now that I've mentioned that target group, the younger generation, and especially younger women, are very open. And we're not going to get them all, but they're open. So it's easier to convince them. And we've heard about conditioning today. And I'm not talking about Pavlov's dog here, but there's another kind of conditioning. If consumers who've never heard about new kiwi varieties will not touch it. But as soon as they are conditioned to see it as something positive, they will be open to trying it. And so this means that producers should be active and inform consumers. But almost 80% of wines in Germany are sold without consultation. And so how do you deal with that? So first you have to get in there. And that's why I said we can talk about consumers, but we have to take one step back and talk about the retailers. Retailers and also gastronomy, they're kind of like the doorman. And these doormen don't let everyone in. So depending on what someone's wearing, they will let them in or not. And the same goes for wine business. And those are the purchasers. Whether they're small retails or gastronomy, the purchasers are these doormen. And if these doormen don't believe in PIWI, then you can forget it. And that is how we fail to reach a really large group. Of course, we can also use a sprinkler effect and try to reach all 42 million customers. But it will be much more effective to try to convince multipliers. And then, of course, producers as well. But I think you've already done a great job there. And, of course, the focus has to be on the final consumer. But they are influenced by multipliers. Well, thank you. Yes. Theoretically, it could go both ways. We know that marketing can work both ways. Is it just the demand, or is it the supply? So a lot has changed here in the last few years. Well, as a wine grower, if I consider planting PIWI varieties and switching from traditional varieties to PIWIs, how should I go about it? Well, this is my question to you, Andreas. If you want to implement PIWIs, how should you do it? Well, we've already heard a lot of information and aspects about the cultivation of PIWIs. They are actually superior almost in all aspects. We've seen in cultivation, for cost savings, etc. So they certainly make financial sense, but all of the other sustainable aspects are also superior, even down to these social aspects. And then the quality of the wine was also discussed, and we also saw that that is excellent. So the only hurdle that needs to be taken is marketing. And that's what we're working on. So we haven't been working on this for 25 years, that's clear, but only for the last 5 years or so, simply because before we didn't have the volume that. So I'm optimistic, but I would encourage any colleague that if you want to grow wine, you should do it organically and using PIWI varieties. And where risks are concerned, well, practicing viticulture, of course, is a risk in this day and age, and anything that we can do to secure our existence is a good thing. And PIWIs are the variety that reduces the risk more than any other. So this is the biggest individual factor that can make a viticulture sustainable. And this argument really speaks for it. And if we then all work together to drive the marketing of kiwi, to build the brand, to offer a wide variety of products, we can reach a lot of consumers with different preferences. And that's how PIWIs will evolve in the next few years. And then I think it's going to be totally easy to get wine growers on board. Well, thank you for your opinion. We are still at a point where wine growers still have their work cut out, particularly when it comes to information and educating consumers. So, Martin, what do you think? How can we reach consumers even better? And is it necessary even, or is it maybe asking too much of consumers to understand all this? I would like to talk to you about Baden and Sauvignon Gris. If I say Solaris is the best type and someone else says another is the best variety, that's difficult. We have a name for the red wines to get away from these variety names, but for white wines, you could say Baden, you could also use Sauvignon Gris, and we want to give this a profile and to add this to the requirements, what it should taste like. There are two types, one for the younger target group and one to replace Pinot wines. And this is at least for the Baden region. So we can go ahead here so that every wine grower offers this new wine. And if we all move into the same direction here, then we can be successful. And so I think that in other regions, we have to have initiatives like that too. Just look at what are the strengths of the Baden region. We have good dry wines that go well with a meal. And so that is why it makes sense to push this particular wine, Sauvignon Gris, and we should work with others to improve the quality as quickly as possible so that any client who buys Baden wine should find a Sauvignon Gris wherever they buy their wines. And that's the way to do it. It's important because if we each fight our own battle, we're not going to be able to succeed. We have to have a joint strategy. Great. Thank you. I think that's a good point. Are there any questions from the audience or any remarks from the audience that we could maybe include in this discussion? Maybe also referring to what was just said.
Please wait for the microphone to arrive so that everybody can hear you well. Mr. Schmidt just said something interesting. 2023, in this region, a lecture was given on this subject, but we haven't heard anything since that time. So the Tormino project, it's still ongoing. New wine growers joined and new vintages were included. And I think the project span has been extended to the year 2026. Well, but this much is clear. Of course, internal project funds have been spent on this, but not for advertising. I think that would be presumptuous if we used funds to advertise individual wines. But there is a homepage or website. People are also active on the social media. There's another hand up, close to the front. If you permit, I'd like to say the following. You just said that the protection organization would then set rules for the Sauvignon Gris. Do you have to do the same as with the traditional wines? And if I think back to the lecture by Mr. Fischer, the many different flavors and the overarching trends and the different possibilities that we can derive from the varieties, which really speak for a success story, for really trying to pump the market. Given that, I believe you should not try to narrow things down too much, define it too much. And that is why I think it would make sense to not necessarily talk about the vineyard classification but to focus on the statements about sustainability. So it's just something that I suggest to the people here, to the audience. So when it comes to the Sauvignon Gris, I see this rather differently. Now, a lot of people are growing it now. The worst thing that could happen is that everybody has their own definition of what the right flavor is, whether it's residual sugar or whatever. So, for example, you could decide I'll produce a sparkling wine or very light wine, for example, very dry. Well, it's such a broad range we're covering. And with the Sauvignon Gris, I mean, it really depends so much on when the grapes are actually harvested. It will make for a completely different wine, whether it's 80, 89, or 105 degrees Exler. You know, the wines will be worlds apart. Actually, there were some people were quite put off by this. But if we really want to move forward, then we will have to define a corridor, as it were, a range. Well, it's difficult if you use alcohol content. That will be the defining factor. So it would be 85 to 92 degrees Exler. That would be a narrow range. So we'll know what the residual sugar is, and that's it. It's simple. And this way, you will get a wine that is recognizable. And I just mentioned it. Advertising campaign when run. You know, we don't have the money to do it here in Baden, or the wine growers here don't. So we need to at least agree on a shared wine style in order to be successful. Now, a lot of people believe this is too limiting. They want to introduce other PIWI classes. But if you plant Sauvignon Gris and you want 14 volume percent and so much residual sugar, then, it must not be called a PIWI. You'll have to think of a different name. Well, I want to fully support this and just remind you of what happened in the Palatinate region. So we try to really establish a profile for the 5 most important varieties so that the gatekeeper, the purchaser in retail said, it's every time it's different. No, if it's not, then this will be our trump card. So if we can find out which brands are successful, then it's normally, if you look at Prosecco, they have a clear-cut definition of what they're allowed to do and not. And if we want to be successful, then we can't afford to over-individualize. Of course, we can try to breed new varieties, but if we really push for the best contenders, such as the Sauvignon Gris, then that's right. And there are methods that will work, which allows for some variation from estate to estate, of course, or from grower to grower, but that you at least all comply with the definition that that's representative of the brand. Now, I would like to say, yes, I can see both sides. I can see the advantages and the trends there are, but your last statement opened up, of course, the field for more. So I believe it was really helpful that over the last years, we had your test results and were able to rest on your support. I mean, all the wine growers who are cultivating PIWIs, and these efforts are going to be stepped up. Firstly, to make sure that we'll get good quality PIWIs, but when it comes to how narrow a definition can be, I think recognizability is important, but a variety, if it's already regarded as attractive, it will survive even if there are different aging variants of it. Just think of the, Riesling, for example. It's not the case that you can only grow it on a very small parcel of land, for example. Now, we've come up with 4 different maturing versions of the Sauvignon Gris simply in order to demonstrate its versatility from stainless steel tanks to orange or oak casks. So that would be my wish, to continue doing that. Nevertheless, I do not want to question that you need to have support to produce top quality and to work towards the recognizability of a variety. And since we already have a lot of eyes on the Sauvignon Gris variety here in the Baden region, I think that's great. Many, many years I would have wished for something like this. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed to do this, to experiment. I have a natural wine too, but it's not a Badener Qualitätswein, a quality wine. That is why it's permitted. I mean, we're talking about the definition of a quality wine, a Baden quality wine. Now, you can have, of course, the oak wine or others. So you can really play on all of these ideas. So there are a lot of possibilities. Well, I'm definitely in favor of really establishing a profile. You can really raise the visibility and really raise the bar significantly for this variety. Well, thank you very much for this lively discussion on this point. I have another question I'd like to ask. Since we have mentioned retailers and the hospitality industry, so the multipliers, if we want to involve them more, Martin, do you have any idea? Do you have an idea as to how we can even increase the fame of it? Well, I believe over the last 5 years, my customers, which are retailers and gastronomists, they all know what PIWIs are. So that's been accomplished a long time ago already. And people are happy to sell it. People are willing to sell it. Looking at the PIWI collective or Alnatura or other large customers that I'd like to serve, and I have to say, me and my expert retailers, I made much more progress with them compared to the larger ones. Because if it's a new product, then it's the specialist retailer that will take it up much more eagerly compared to the big ones. And that is why I think it's not such a bad thing that we're beginning with the specialist trade first, because they are more knowledgeable and they know what needs to change. And well, on this, another anecdote. Now, a specialist retailer who supplies to hospitality businesses, for example, they are passionate about it. They are passionate about offering something new to them. So coming back to the old white men, with the sommeliers, I have to say they're not as responsive at this stage. They're not as open. Nevertheless, we'll have to see what works and try it out. And if you see that it might work, then you really put your energy into this. That's what you focus on. And that is how I really changed tack over the last years. You have to develop a kind of sense of what might work and what not. So that is where you want to intensify your efforts then. Thank you very much for this view. Now, did you want to add to what we just heard, if we have the time, if you can be brief? Now, just this morning, we had a Freiburg meeting on the possibilities we have here. We've held such meetings regularly, and we have set up a booth at the wine festival in Freiburg. And this is where we can see how the audience responds or how the public responds to our initiatives. Now, whether we need to do more, step up our efforts, that is what we'll need to keep watching. So I think there are a lot of open doors, but we'll have to walk towards these open doors and support each other. If we do, there will be ways. And somebody talked about one possible route. You mentioned it too. Not everybody is as open-minded about this. And also, if you look at the retailers, some of them are really holding back on PIWI, so a lot remains to be done. Well, I think Romana Eschensberger should probably be regarded as an ambassador of PIWI wines, I believe. Now, talking about collaboration or cooperation, I have a question to you. Now, research institutes and the wine industry, how can they work together more intensively in order to make greater progress with PIWIs? So how's this best tackled? Now, finally, you've mentioned this word, so cooperation. Everybody talks about it, nobody does it. Seems like it almost. But just think about it. There are a couple of PIWI projects in Germany at this time. Vidifit is one of the biggest. There are a handful of initiatives. There are a couple of wine growers, but by and large, it's not more than 3,500 hectares, 3.5%. Now, in terms of volume, that would be 1.5% out of the total volume, 80 million hectoliters or so. So, very, very little. So, how best to approach this? And you said it. Of course, you can try to go it alone, but if you do, you will probably just have a niche product. If you want to be successful, you have to team up. You'll have to join the team. And that is precisely what we do. We here on the stage. And I'm so grateful when the VidiFit project was first started. This was a key part. Communication, know-how transfer, that has become such an important part, and I can only heap praise, really, on the team here. Thank you. What you did was extremely successful. And I believe 5 or 6 years ago, when all of this began, our results showed that the wine growers were very hesitant at first. In 2020, we conducted a study that showed this, and now wine growers, whether organically certified or not, almost all of them talk about PIWI. So, message received. That's excellent. But more needs to happen. And I think this collaboration, cooperating in this spirit, the cohesion, the bridges that need to be built, all of this must be done, and we'll have to sort of walk to the other side and continue to work together. There's a multitude of initiatives that you have started. Now we have to continue them. And I very much believe that this will not have been the last big PIWI project. I'm sure this will continue, because without cooperation, we'll fail. That's a fact we all need to accept and be aware of. But I think people are prepared to do this. Well, thank you for lodging this wonderful appeal. And since we're talking about the need to build bridges, today we primarily looked at the German market. Andreas, because of PIWI Deutschland and PIWI International, you have a chance of looking at what your colleagues do. So what can you let us know? How relevant are PIWIs there? What's the development like? Now, you briefly touched upon it. We talked about the terminology, the names. And we found that for many, many years, PIWI has been around. We're talking about PIWI varieties, PIWI wines, PIWI conference. So all of this seems a given now. And this is very important, not to be underestimated. How much momentum this generates, that we're all talking about the same thing, that we're using the same vocabulary, the same brand. I would say that this is vital even. In other countries, the situation differs very much. In France, so they cultivate a lot of these varieties, but they don't talk much about it. They have a very different approach to this. Fine. Hopefully, however, they will start talking about it someday in the future. At the moment, there doesn't seem to be a need to do this for them. But there are also countries like Austria, for example, and the two big wine nations of France and Italy have been mentioned today, who've really given it their all, really, to push it. So winemaking without PIWIs is unthinkable, and the development things have taken there is much more dynamic compared to Germany. Now, even though we have a longer history here, but if you look at the share, at the dynamics, much more happening in these countries. Or at Scandinavia, for example, for them it's the reverse. There are some producers that produce 70 or 80 or 90% of PIWI varieties of wines. So it's an international phenomenon. It's certainly on the agenda in all wine-growing countries. Of course, these developments differ slightly, but we're all one big community. And I think we all have the wish to create a future for wine growing with this. And I think a key tool, and this is what brings us all together here, of course, is to lend each other mutual support. Great to see this, by the way. Very encouraging indeed. Gertli, very briefly. Now, if you look a little bit further beyond, I mean, Italy and France are stepping on the accelerator, of course, or Switzerland too, and Austria. Nevertheless, I should also mention there are countries like Spain, Greece, Portugal, Croatia, who are not really using PIWIs, but autonomous varieties, endemic varieties, in order to push sustainability in this way. So it's a similar attempt, but, well, the approach is still, also there are many differences. Thank you for this. I think there was a question here. I'm happy to answer this, so if you could bring over the mic. Some information, not from Switzerland, but from working together with international partners. I have to slightly contradict what has just been said. Now, of course, consumers in Germany or Switzerland, when it comes to foreign wines, are clearly focusing and leaning heavily on French and Italian wines. It's not true that, French winemakers are really using a lot of PIWIs. In the Alsace, they blend in 5% of PIWI varieties. And actually, this blend in or drop in almost is limited to a span of 10 years. So I doubt that the leaders of the movement can be found in Italy or France. I don't think that is quite the case. It's not a level playing field. So in Germany, you'll have to see if you want to increase the wine growing areas, you'll have to use the opportunities that are there. Now, talking about France, we went to Colmar last year, and the efforts undertaken there shouldn't be underestimated. Now, this regulation that you mentioned is not cast in stone. I assume that will be changed in the future, or we expect it to be changed again. No. Preparing the ground for us, well, that doesn't happen. We have to really do our own thing. We have to do our own homework. If we said that some people just grow these varieties, but they didn't talk about it, and that this was somehow making things easier for us, that is not true. We have to be careful. We have to work on it full steam. Now, of course, this is a very highly competent panel, but what about pricing? So far, pricing hasn't been mentioned, and I hope I'm not preempting important things, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about the prices and where the prices should be set for PIWI wines. Well, perhaps you can answer straight away. Well, we conducted a study, I think that was right at the beginning of 2021, with consumers. Well, first we explained to them what PIWI wines were about, and then we asked them about the price they would expect compared to traditional or organically certified wine. And to our surprise, at least we were surprised, that they thought that the price should be fairly high for these wines. So there seems to be some scope, really, to position these wines, and it would be a pity if we made the same mistake twice, as was the case with the Dornfelder, where the high price then dropped sharply. But I believe it's all a question of supply and demand, so that will balance out. But we have two experts here on the subject of pricing, I'm sure. Let's hear them. Well, in the case of Cremor, we thought long and hard about pricing. We simply asked our customers in the end, which Cremors do you sell, at what price, and how much can you sell if the price is like this? 15 euros is the price that we finally arrived at. So that's a good price to ask, but not excessive, I would say. Normally, my sparkling wines cost 12 or 13 euros, so the PIWI sparkling costs 2 euros more, but 5 years later, I'm selling a multiple of the PIWI sparkling wine. Now, and we performed a Cremor test. Well, not we, but in our region, and we were amongst the top 10. We were the only PIWI wine, and we were also the most affordable one. So because of that, I knew that was the right decision. We have a new white wine now, a Sauvignon Gris, which comes at a cost of $8.50. Now, looking at how much I intend to sell, the cost should be around $6 or $6.99, $6.50, $6.99 in the organic supermarket. But I have a sense that actually you could actually ask for slightly more as a wine grower, but time will tell. And whenever I launch a new product, of course, you should not start with aggressive pricing policies. You have to really work on the market, prepare it. You need to spend money on marketing. You can't simply sell it for cheap. So you should ask for slightly more than you would ask for your standard product. I think that is the least that you should do. I fully support this, and I believe there's potential for doing this if we look at the general context. People are prepared, after all, to spend a little bit more on it. So the range is between 9 and 23 euros. So even your organic supermarket like Alnatura will still take on board your wines in that case, or even your small organic shop around the corner, restaurants. Not all of them will be willing to take it up, of course. That goes without saying, but we have a model that's called the Solidarity Vineyard. We have 250 members as part of that group, and they're not really bound by price. They set the price when they become members. So half of our operation is run as a solidarity-based scheme, and the members will then set the price themselves. Now, it's interesting. And the cost is in the range of 13 to 14 euros on average. So that is quite a positive story, isn't it? Well, thank you very much for this view, too. I mean, this instills us with hope. I mean, if we can get a decent price for our product. Any questions or comments from the audience? Not at the moment. Yes, there is one. Yes, we have questions from the chat. PIWI wines, to what extent can they bring about an increase in wine consumption that will not be to the detriment of consumer patterns with traditional wines? I think that's a question to all of you. Well, I don't think that PIWI wines will save the wine industry. They can improve the performance of it, I believe. But my expectation would not be that PIWI wines will help to salvage the poor situation that the wine market is in at the moment. Well, the way I see it is that if you have a new product, you want to reach out to new customers. And I listed those customers, the women's and the Lohas. These are my target groups for these wines. And I will never get them with the Riesling or a Pinot Noir, but I do with PIWIs, and that is why for me it's a win-win. I have a new loyal clientele, new customers that I wouldn't have been able to serve without them. So everybody will have to ask themselves how they can do it. 3.5 hectares, percent, sorry, not hectares, percent. Thank you. And may I ask you to make one final statement, concluding statement. Where do you see the future of PIWI wines and what remains to be done? Well, I believe what we can see at this time is a little bit of a revolution with PIWIs, and I strongly assume that this revolution will continue. It's not going to be a huge boom, but a little bit of a boom, at least. And what do I expect for the future? Well, it's precisely what you said. I said it's not going to save the wine world, the world of wine. I'll stick to this, but it will help us to access new customers. It's this special group of customers who stop or who quit drinking wine because of health reasons. I think we could actually win them back by using the sustainability argument. Now, I take a very personal view of this. No, I hope that my kids will no longer have to use crop protection like my dad have done or me. So hopefully in the future we'll only plant PIWIs. Now, we've only been planting PIWIs over the last 3 or 4 years, and that is how we'll continue it. I can only support this, and I hugely enjoy the fact that I've been privileged to work this way for 20 years already, and I believe there's big potential for us and for our colleagues. We're not going to save the wine world, certainly not, but it's part of the solution and not part of the problem. That is why I think we have good reason to be optimistic. Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much to the three of you for this great discussion. Thank you to all for listening, for sticking it out with us for such a long time. And now I hope you'll enjoy the wine tasting.
Ja, vielen